Well, for me, existentialism is an ethic. I think it's more of an ethic than an ontology. I mean, obviously you have Heidegger and then you have Levinas following on from Heidegger, kind of critiquing the emphasis on being per se. But I tend to think that what's important about existentialism, and certainly if you look at Sartre or Camus or other existential things, maybe even Heidegger, that I think it's an ethic, and I think it's an ethic of which is a it's an ethic of humanization, or rather an ethic which rejects dehumanization, which tries to keep human existences at the central focus of how we think about human being, so that we're not turning people into machines, as in Booby's concept of the I it, that we're not kind of itifying people. We're not focusing just on grand Hegelian historical movements or Marxist theories of social change and evolution and technological determinism. The existential philosophers have always called our attention back to what it means to exist. And, so that's how I don't understand existentialism as an ethic of humanization. So, there's differences. And there was an interesting debate years ago between Spinelli and John Rowan about existentialism versus humanism. And of course, Heidegger and Sartre have that debate as well between existentialism and humanism. But for me, existentialism is fundamentally a humanism, or at least if existentialism isn't a humanism, then it's not something I'm particularly interested in. And I think that kind of, when you think about Heidegger's flirtations with the Nazis, that's for me the kind of risks of an existentialism that doesn't have that humanistic ethos. Broadly humanistic, not humanism in terms of Maslow and individuality, but humanism in the sense of a kind of deep respect and valuing for people and people's existences. People have tried to summarize it in different ways. So I know Macquarie says it's a kind of school of thought. And I mean, you could summarize existentialism as a school of thought which focuses on what it means to exist and, what is being. And then you have the kind of, and I guess when we talk about what is being, we can think about being as kind of life. What is life in that kind of longitudinal sense? And then we can also think about being in a more phenomenological sense in terms of what is our being here and now. And that would be another way of thinking about what is existentialism, or what is existential philosophy. And of course, there's a difference between, sorry, I keep on saying of course, that's very patronizing, I do apologize. But there's a difference between kind of existentialism and then existential philosophy. And Emmy van Deurzen particularly, I think, distinguishes between existentialists as a kind of philosophical movement around Camus and Sartre, de Beauvoir, Fanon people, and then existential philosophy is questions about existence and about being. That she would see as kind of, in a sense, there's lots of people, Aristotle onwards, who have asked questions of existential philosophy, whereas existentialism is more of a kind of particular answer to that question at a particular historical period. There wasn't just philosophers, but was also artists and writers, and was a kind of cultural movement. It's obviously very diverse, religious, not religious, progressive, not progressive, individualistic, more relational. Some was more meaning orientated, some's less meaning orientated. But I think that's what it shares is that ethic of humanization.